Que lo que mi gente, what is up? It is your girl Christina. For today's video, I wanted to come on here and kind of address some of the comments that were made under my Fat Joe Claims Latinos Are Black video and just further clarify some of the things that I said. Now, as always, if you guys like this look, it is like a nighttime smoky look, you can check my previous video, which is the tutorial. So, you guys know I am a pretty small channel. Like, I'm almost at 1,000 subs, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, that's tiny. So for me, if I get like, I don't know, 300 views or something on a video, that's good to me. That's a lot. I'm happy. Cool. So I was actually quite surprised to see how quickly that video went around and got views. I think that's at like 1.7K views now. So that was a little bit surprising. So yeah, it seems like that video brought out a lot of crazies as well. So this is why I'm making this video. So for those of you that have been watching me for a while, you guys know that apart from, you know, makeup and stuff like that, part of what I have tried to do is just educate, you know, my viewers on certain things. You guys know that I love to share things about my Dominican culture with you guys. And part of what I have done is attempt to bridge the gap of understanding between us and other groups, especially when it comes to Dominicans. I feel like we're just very misunderstood at times, and people love to jump and label us racist, wannabe whites. We denounce our African heritage. We treat Haitians like crap, blah, blah, blah. So that is why I try to explain to people why, I don't know, we do or say things the way that we do. And, you know, let me just say, I don't know everything. I'm really learning as I go along. And I also want to say, like, I honestly have not learned as much about Dominican history as I have in this, like, past year, any other point throughout my life. Like, I've just learned so much, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Dominican TV language. I have learned a lot about DR through you, and I also want to thank you for actually pushing me to read in Spanish and to do these book review videos with you on your channel in Spanish. So thank you for that. And I also want to give a quick shout out to one of my subscribers, Estrelleta, if you're watching this. I have learned so much about Dominican history just from reading your comments. Like, you literally seem to know everything when it comes to Dominican history. And let me just say, I like you because although you are a Dominican nationalist, you're balanced. You're not biased, especially when it comes to this race stuff. I don't see you being biased to one side more than the other, which I think is important for Dominican people. So, yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like sometimes we become like the black sheep of the Latin community. And I don't know, whenever I speak on a certain topic, I try as much as possible to articulate things in a way where others can understand what I'm trying to say, and I'm not coming off as rude or condescending or like I'm trying to bash another group of people. So what I have observed is that when the topic of African ancestry and Latin Americans comes up, African Americans are always inserted into the conversation, or they insert themselves, and it always becomes an us versus them type of situation. I see people on both sides just going at each other, and it just kind of overshadows the actual message. And now look, I don't try to pretend like Black Americans and Hispanics always get along. I mean, we don't. It is what it is. We just don't. It simply doesn't always happen. Are there situations in which Hispanics and Black people get along? Yes. And as I've said a bunch of times already, this whole African Americans and Dominicans not getting along, that was not my experience. Growing up, most of my friends were African American females. Majority of whom were, you know, smart, intelligent women. We were all in AP classes together. They always got along with me and my family, and vice versa. The same goes for my male African American friends that I've had. So it was just never an issue. So I guess that is why I sometimes feel like, okay, I've been around both sides enough, and I feel like I've had these type of conversations with both sides enough to where I can kind of see, you know, where both Dominicans and like Black people are coming from when it comes to certain issues. So why not try to clear the air a little bit if I can? So yeah, so that is again what I try to do. It doesn't always work, but you know, some people have their minds made up about either or. Some Dominicans have their minds made up, they don't like Black people, but whatever. Some Black people have their minds made up about Dominicans. I can't change that. So moving on to the actual comments. So personally, I believe that the biggest source of tension between us and Black people comes down to racial classification. And this is no offense to anyone, but I do sometimes feel like Black Americans don't always take the time to see or understand how racial identity operated within Latin America. And so when they see all these people of color not solely identifying as Black, it's kind of like, what you mean you're not Black? But it's because that is what they have been used to here in the United States. And, you know, here historically in this country, mixed people didn't have the luxury of going around calling themselves mixed. They were Black, and that was that. So now when you look at Latin America, though, it was a whole different ball game. Race operated on more of a continuum between whites and Black, not the dichotomy of white versus Black that it was here in the United States. And that goes back to the casta system of the Spanish, where, I mean, they literally had a name for every type of mixture you could think of between Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans. They had different colors for skin tones, and that's where we get the, you know, the mulattos and the zambos and the mestizos and the pardos and the castizos and the jabao and moreno, trigueño. I mean, it was just so many different words. So for you to identify as solely white or solely Black, you had to be pretty much very white or very Black, you know. So then, you know, these people from these countries that have been used to that type of racial system come to the United States, and so there's clash because it's a different, you know, what's the word? Different racial systems at hand here clashing. So, but I also want to say though, that I do think that Hispanics, well, some Hispanics should be more mindful though of the fact that, you know, many of us or our families, they did come to the United States. There was already a system in place here. You know, we came into a country where African Americans have already been for generations. So we can't just blame them for viewing things the way they do, especially considering that a lot of these things were imposed on them. You know, I think people sometimes forget Black people did not create the one-drop rule, you know, or some of these other things that was placed on them because of racism, because of the institutional, systematic racism in this country. So I do think we should be more mindful of that and more understanding of African Americans in that sense. At the end of the day, they have been the ones dealing with racist white people forever. And before any of y'all try to come for me, I know that not all white people are racist, and I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist in Latin America, because it most certainly does. I'm just saying what African Americans specifically have had to face when it comes to racism, because it was quite different than what people in Latin America had to go through. Just my opinion. So I just think there just needs to be more understanding between both parties. Now, the first set of comments that I wanted to talk about, which I was actually kind of surprised to see, but I saw several Black people under my video say that Black Latinos or Hispanics in general are only now claiming to be Black because they want in on the reparations due to ADOS. Listen. I ain't heard not one Latino talk anything remotely close to them trying to get in on reparations. I honestly don't think that is on any Hispanic person's radar, because that has nothing to do with us. And there was this one comment. This dude said, ADOS, don't fall for it. This is just a manipulation to secure power within the Black community, and it's them trying to how did he say it? Basically, like, take advantage of Black American culture. And he said they want our, what did he say? They want and need our cover and for us to legitimize them as authentic. I was like, bro, you joking, right? You're joking. First of all, I mean, y'all making it seem like getting reparations is as simple as saying, oh, I check Black on the census now. I'm Black. Yeah, I get reparations now. Like, what? No, I am 1000% sure that is not how that's going to work. Okay. And I mean, how would that even work anyway? Like, take me, for example, I do check Black on the census for my race, and then I check Hispanic for ethnicity. But how would I get reparations when my family lineage traces back to a remote campo in the mountains of the Dominican Republic? Like, how would that even work? Like, I feel like some of these comments are just completely senseless. Like, come on, y'all. And I mentioned this to someone, and I told him, like, yeah, I've been getting these comments from some Black people, and I was like, I was surprised to see that because Latinos are not thinking about reparations. And he was like, I'm not surprised. And he was like, think about it. A lot of these people didn't even know Black Latinos existed, and all they know is American struggle. So for them, and this, I mean, that was what he said. I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. So it's like for these certain African Americans, I guess, I don't know, they now feel like we're trying to infringe upon y'all's territory. I don't know. But all I gotta say to that is nobody's trying to come for y'all's reparations. I, for one, don't think that we should even be included in that conversation. So let's get that out the way. Now the second thing, and this is one of the big ones. This is one of the things that always has Black people looking at us sideways and always trying to say things to us, but it's embracing our European blood. So this one thing, it is a little difficult to speak on because ultimately, you know, this all goes back to slavery. And a lot of people look at us like, how could you embrace your colonizer blood? You know, it's all a product of rape and this and that. And I just first want to say I get it, and I just want to make it very clear that I am not in any way trying to minimize the brutality of slavery, nor am I trying to undermine or make light of what it was. Okay, not at all. But I do think it is worth noting that the way in which the Spanish versus the British or the French operated and did their things, it was different. And at the end of the day, those differences did have a lasting effects on how we, the descendants of all this, view our European heritage. Now, there are some Latinos that don't want to claim it. They denounce it. They say, I'm not claiming my colonizer blood, whatever. But of course, for the most part, that's not how most Latin Americans view their European heritage. They do embrace it. Now, one factor going back to the colonial period, which I believe is part of why Latin Americans do embrace their European blood, is because the Spanish, in many cases, they were actually very involved in the upbringing of their mixed race children. And many times they would legally recognize these children. So I think for anyone in that situation, whether it was an indigenous woman or a Black woman that had a child with a white man, seeing that they were actually taking care of their kid, I'm sure that made them feel like, okay, like, my child is being recognized, my child is mixed, he is probably going to have a better future, whatever. And so I think anyone in that situation would not just automatically denounce the European heritage, you know? And I think you also have to take into account that Latin American countries did not experience segregation and Jim Crow and all those things the way the United States did. there was a lot of intermixing between white and black people, and it was not all due to rape. There were actually consensual relationships between white and black people. And then you have all of the European immigrants that came during the colonial period, but also post-slavery, that obviously were not slave owners. Many of them were lower class, you know, peasant class that came to the Americas trying to seek a better life. And so they came to all these different Latin American countries, and many of them ended up intermixing with the local populations, which many of the locals were already mixed, or they were black or whatever. So it's not that simple as, oh, it's all a product of rape. And there was one comment in particular that kind of pissed me off, because it was this dude. He was coming for me, and let me just say, he first commented and he called me a B. Okay, he said something like, "Bitch, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about." I was like, excuse me, what did I say that was so offensive to you that you felt the need to call me a B? Anyway, and then he made another comment talking crap, and so I responded to him, and I can't remember how we even got on the subject, but in one of my comments to him, I told him, well, my maternal grandfather was a full-blooded Spaniard, okay? And so my grandfather, his parents migrated from Spain to DR in the early 1900s. My grandfather had 3 wives. The first one was this white Dominican lady. The other 2 were black. The second one being my grandmother, and the third one being this other lady, my mom's stepmom, and she was black, like straight up unambiguously looking black Dominican woman. And you know, he had kids with all of them. Yeah, my grandfather, once he had a taste of that chocolate, it was no going back for him. So, you know, I told him, you know, my grandfather was a full-blooded Spaniard, and so this guy responds and said, and most likely your grandfather was a black Dominican woman and he raped her. I was like, excuse me? Really? Like, who says that? Why would you say that? It made, I don't know, it just really ticked me off in the moment, because I was like, who are you to come under my video talking all this shit, and then you have the audacity to say that my grandfather raped my grandmother? Like, what is wrong with some of these people? Like, I don't know. And that's why I say you guys have to understand, it's not as simple as colonizer, slaves, rape. Did that occur? Of course it did. But that was not the only thing that occurred. At the end of the day, a lot of, like I said, a lot of consensual relationships did happen between white and black people. Like, why is that so hard to understand? Like, it happens now. You think it wasn't happening back then? Of course it was. Like, you spend enough time around somebody, you're going to start liking each other, you know? So, anyway, that is something else I feel that we also need to keep in mind. Not all of our European heritage came from the conquistadors and slave-owning colonizers, okay? So, that's another thing. Now, under the video, I also had quite a few people say that the Olmecs and the Native Americans, that they're black, that they were black, alright? So, I know some of y'all are going to disagree with me on this, and let me just say I am no expert when it comes to this, but first let me give a shout out though to my Jamaican homie truth teacher. You are always coming through with the facts, and thank you for also helping me gather some of this information. You have such a wealth of knowledge, and you are also somebody else that is very balanced and non-biased, and you can see both sides to a situation, and I appreciate you for that, so thank you. Okay, so in regards to the Native Americans, this is the information that I have and that I believe to be true, okay? So again, some of y'all are not going to agree with me, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree. So from what we know, there were several waves of migrations from Asia into North America. And from North America, some of these people trickled down into Central and South America. Now, there's also some evidence to support the claim that people of Melanesian origin made it to the Americas, specifically South America, although the exact route they took has not been agreed upon. So it is within the realm of possibility that some Africans made it to the Gulf of Mexico or to the Caribbean. Some might have been fishermen that were drifted throughout the Atlantic and made it to this side, you know, whatever. But the idea that there was regular trade between Africans and the Americas is not necessarily true. Now, just hear me out, y'all. Hear me out. Because I know there's a lot of things out there and videos to say that there was, but just hear me out for a second. Okay. So, several things to just note when comparing African cultures to Mesoamerica, okay? So, Central and West Africans were Iron Age societies, okay? So, Mesoamericans, on the other hand, they had never learned to work anything harder than copper. So, also, West Africans had domesticated cattle, such as goats and sheep, whereas Mesoamericans had not, except for llamas and alpacas in the Andes. Now, you also have to take into account the spiritual differences. Africans believe in the veneration of ancestors, whereas Mesoamericans believed in human sacrifice. They believed that it was necessary. And they also believed that after death, our souls went into an underworld, you know. So there's also those differences, which if the Mesoamericans were really African, this would all be the same. Like, y'all get where I'm trying to go with this? Okay. Also, two other things to consider. If there had been regular trade between the Africans and the Mesoamericans, why was there no introduction of American foods into the Old World until after European contact? And had there been regular contact between Africans and Native Americans during those time periods, then the people in Mesoamerica would have already developed immunity to the Europeans' diseases. And we all know that a lot of Native Americans died from the diseases they got from the Europeans, because the West Africans had already long built immunity to these diseases due to exposure to North Africans that had been trading with Europeans for thousands of years. So, in my opinion, I believe this more so points to the claim that the Native Americans were not just Black Africans or whatever that just made their way over here. We can't just overlook the fact that a lot of these people came in through Asia. Now, some people will say, well, if you know, technically all of humanity comes from Africa. And yes, the Homo sapiens, the first Homo sapiens, came out from Africa and ventured upwards into Northern Europe, mixed with Neanderthals, created the Caucasian race. Some went northeast into Asia. Some went kind of southeast into like Australia and those regions. But anyway, from Asia, made it down into the Americas, whatever. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this. So if you're going to use the out of Africa argument, well, then at one point, can we acknowledge that, well, there's differences. So because we all ultimately came out of Africa, should a white Caucasian person then say that they're African? Or should an Asian say that they're African? Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Anyway, and then some use the arguments of the Olmec heads, you know, those big stone heads, and the fact that they had big noses and big lips. But let's remember, guys, those features are not exclusive to Africans, okay? There are many Asian people that have those same traits as far as, you know, other groups of people. So that doesn't prove that they were African or Negroid, you know what I'm trying to say? So that is my opinion when it comes to that, okay? And lastly, the daggone guitar, man. Oh my goodness. So in that video, you guys, I said, if you all remember that when it comes to Dominican music, the most notable African influence in our music is the drums, you know, la tambora, the palo drums, all of that, the percussion, that is all comes from Africa. But if you look at the guitar and the accordion, that points to the European contribution in our music. And apparently various people had a problem with me saying the guitar came from the Europeans. Look, I'm not here to argue the actual origin of these instruments, okay? I was just talking about who brought them, okay? The drums, that's Africa. When you listen to Dominican merengue, the accordion that you hear in merengue típico, those accordions were brought into the island from Germans in the 1880s, I believe it was. And when you listen to the guitar in bachata, that playing style, that is from the Spanish. Point blank. That's all I was saying. What is the issue? Okay, why are we sitting here arguing the actual origin of the guitar? The point is, regardless of who made the first original guitar, it was the Spanish whose musical influence is what was incorporated into Dominican culture, the current Dominican culture. Like, that's all I was trying to say, y'all. Like, chill out, okay? So, yeah, it was a lot of very interesting comments under that post, and I know I focus a lot of on the things that like Black people were saying, but that was the majority of the comments I had to kind of side eye. So, you know, let me just say, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, damned if we do, damned if we don't. If we don't acknowledge our African ancestry, I don't know, we love our colonizers, we're self-haters, you know, this, that, and the third. But if we do, it's, oh, y'all just want reparations that ADOS is supposed to get. Y'all just doing it because, you know, y'all want to be trendy and blah, blah, blah. It's like, my Black peoples, my African American people, I love y'all, but come on, man. Which one is it? Which one is it? But anyway, with all that being said, guys, like I mentioned in my previous video where I talked about colorism, I know that I have a diverse following. I have many of you that listen to me that are African American. I have many of you that listen to me that are Hispanic. And ultimately, I just want to create a sense of community on my channel where people from both ends can freely express themselves without feeling that somebody on the other end is going to attack them, okay? And for the most part, I have to say, that is what I've been seeing. So thank you to my subscribers for being respectful of everyone. I know I get some trolls here and there that like to come and talk crap under my videos. And I know I have a bunch of lurkers that just love watching, like, ooh, what this girl say now? Let me go ahead and hit that dislike real quick and then scurry away. You know, it is what it is. That's just what happens on YouTube. All right, this video has gone long enough. So, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this down below. It's a crazy world out here. That's all I can say. All right, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll check you guys in the next video. Bye.